Hurricane Melissa items. Then we're going to move on to Belgorod items, Puerto Rico. Then we're going to move on to Moscow. Then we're going to shift over to Hungary. Then a couple items in China to report. Then an item in Malaysia and Japan. And then a couple of small items dealing with Venezuela, Trinidad and Tobago, as well as a couple of updates for Israel, Hamas, Libya, Hezbollah, Pakistan, India, Afghanistan, and finally Istanbul. This is the information that happened in Belgorod yesterday. As a result, the strike on the Belgorod Reservoir isolated part of the Russian military and Voshchansk from their main units, which caused serious logistical problems. After the dam broke, water flooded the Seversky Donay, blocking supply routes and flooding Russian positions. The Russian brigades 128th, 116th, 68th, 136th downstream are now under threat of flooding, including personnel and equipment, and also under threat of flooding were the new position of units of the 6th Army, namely the 68th, 69th Divisions and the 44th Army Corps. So now we're going to get into some videos. And so
вот так вот позиция дуб разлилась, вода вышла с берегов, вся дорога потопление. Ёбаный. Вот машина стоит в воде, встала, а выехать не может. Вот так.
So this is what I'm referring to, the dam. So this dam was struck, and there's the damage. And then it comes rushing out, obviously, and then flood and impact that those Russian brigades. Okay, so now we're going to move to some China news. So the United States and China have reached an agreement on the framework of a potential trade deal, a significant breakthrough aimed at de-escalating tensions ahead of the high-stakes meeting between the U.S. and China leaders. Now, this is information according to the U.S. Treasury Secretary. So, but keynote here, they've reached an agreement on the framework of a potential trade deal. And so just remember that one note. If there isn't any additional news, or if there is any additional news, but it's mainly talks that broke down, or an official statement on an actual trade deal coming out. So let's move on to the next item for China. So Reuters reported that the U.S. Navy F-18 jet and a Seahawk helicopter both crashed into the South China Sea earlier today while operating from the USS Nimitz. All crew members have been safely recovered. So, that's good to hear. As well as I do want to share,
we have just released our newest video, Something Different, ASMR Sleep Edition of Cognitive Warfare and World Conflict Keynote Updates. As you go to sleep, hit play, and hear the rain, while getting the latest updates on cognitive warfare, as you battle your own in attempt to get sleep.
So now we're going to move on to a brief snippet with Hamas. So Hamas says it will hand over another body of 13 deceased hostages inside Gaza, as Trump's 48-hour warning to the terrorist group looms. So now we're going to move on to some Hurricane Melissa updates. So as you see, this was a video that was recorded yesterday afternoon. And it was really an update that Melissa had turned into a Category 5, And at the time of this particular video, it had not started to turn north. And of course, you know, you can see Jamaica there at the middle top right here. As well as here is a visual. Let me expand that and get larger. Hopefully you can see that. Hurricane Melissa is now the 4th strongest hurricane in the history of the Atlantic Basin, with the latest recon by hurricane hunters measuring 180 mile per hour sustained winds and an insane barometric pressure of between 896 and 893, all on the direct path for Jamaica. And then here is, actually I pulled this morning, here's an updated video, and as you see, it's basically probably within the next hour, Jamaica's really going to start to feel those more intense bands will start to impact them. And I lived around hurricanes for, I don't know, a majority of my life, so I get it. You know, I've been around a couple of Category 4s, threatened by a Category 5, but mainly, you know, hurricanes, you know, where I'm from, it ends up, a good portion of them end up dying down and becoming just Category 1s to 3s for the most part. And like anything else, you know, like California with earthquakes, you get a little condition for it, and you kind of know when it's time to get out of Dodge, right? So, yeah, so keep those folks in mind. There's probably going to be very devastating damage when it's all said and done on Jamaica, which is unfortunate. All right, now we're going to move on to Israel. Okay, so this was some breaking news from earlier this morning. Israel is weighing sanctions on Hamas. So after Hamas staged a fake recovery, and if you don't already know, there was some videos coming out. I was going to capture it, but I was a little worried about some copyright, so I wasn't able to put that together for this video this morning. However, in those videos, it reportedly shows them acting as if they've dug up and found some former hostages' bodies, and Israel's quite pissed. So as a result, Prime Minister Netanyahu has called a top-level security meeting. I believe that started yesterday afternoon. Or actually, I don't know if it started yesterday afternoon or if it's going to happen later today. However, here, you know, they started to I hate it when I get tongue twisted. So essentially what's going on here is some of the options that are being discussed is cutting humanitarian aid to Gaza, expanding Israeli military control beyond that current yellow line, and targeted airstrikes, including elimination of Hamas commanders. The fake body discovery caught on IDF drones showed terrorists planting remains from a man killed 2 years ago, not one of the current hostages. So that's sort of the skinny on that. Now we're going to shift over to Lebanon, and here's a video of a strike. And essentially what this video is showing here is Israel strikes in southern Lebanon, where they eliminated 2 higher level military leaders that were working to re-strengthen Hezbollah as an organization. It's also been reported that I believe it's the Houthis are helping Hezbollah get weapons back into southern Lebanon to help them rearm more in recovery from the previous devastation that happened in Lebanon when Israel was working to essentially eradicate Hezbollah's ability to harm Israel. As well as there has been some reports from the previous 48 hours that Israel may expand from the strikes that it has been conducting into more of a small scale incursion or war, if you will, in an effort to again set Hezbollah back from being a threat to Israel. So now we're going to move on to Moscow. Quite a bit to cover in Moscow. First and foremost, this picture right here. Take this picture with a grain of salt. However, you know, there's been more than, at this point, one source that has shared this information. But apparently, this is Russia's, some of its air defenses around Kremlin specifically. Now, I'm not sure what this gun, because it's not a high enough resolution, it's not zoomed in close enough. You, the viewer, may have a better understanding of what this kind of gun actually is. I don't off of the top of my head. But apparently this is one of their versions of defenses around the Kremlin. And I'm not sure if it's for drones or some type of other concern. Now, speaking of that, I'm going to try to zoom this a little bit more so you can see it. So these are the air defenses in and around Moscow. So, you know, there's been a lot of talk in the media, especially on social media, about drones getting in Moscow, air defense failures where it's damaged their own residential buildings instead of going and actually hitting the targets, etc., etc. Well, here's a map, and you can see from the color code and some of the units, and this is what is known to be the air defenses. But this is the first of its kind that I've actually seen during the course of this war of an actual video or picture. And thank you to Defense Intelligence for putting this together, so they deserve that credit. And as you can see, the radar networking on the outside. So that's what that looks like. Now we're going to get into some deeper information here. So again, take this with a grain of salt, because we don't always know what that psychological propaganda leveraging the media looks like in warfare. But according to the Telegraph, Putin does fear that another coup is approaching as Russia finally begins to buckle under a lot of the sanctions. And essentially what the information is FSB has recently accused Mikhail Khodorkovsky, not sure if I said that correctly, who actually now lives in London, and 22 members of his Russian anti-war committee of preparing a coup. According to the special service, the committee created to oppose the Russia war against Ukraine and is allegedly planning a violent seizure of power and the overthrow of the constitutional order. Experts call this a manifestation of Putin's new sense of vulnerability. And of course, that last sentence there is, you know, take that for what you will. Now here is another map of some drones that from yesterday and the day before. So this is the southeast portion in and around Moscow. In these three areas, there was some explosions in these areas, as well as the closing down of an airport. It may have been reopened by now, but at the time it was closed to arriving and departing aircraft. Mouse is being difficult. So now we got 2 Moscow videos to show you. And really what this video is it's a static picture that was captured in relation to the video. And it's some drone or missile damage that had been done in and around Moscow. And then we have a second video.
Да сейчас будет, жди. Вот подожди, я помолчу. Вот он пошел, на нахуй. Готов.
It catches you off guard.
Да сейчас будет, жди. Вот подожди, я помолчу. Вот он пошел, на нахуй. Готов.
I wish I had some more information on exactly what that was, but I don't, as I compiled this information for this video. But if I can find out, I'll let you all know. Now we're going to move on to Hungary. So Orban will meet with Trump to try to protect Hungary from the impact of U.S. sanctions on Russian oil, and that is according to Bloomberg. The Hungarian government is trying to convince the Americans that due to the lack of access to the sea, the country allegedly has no choice but to buy Russian energy resources. When asked whether Trump had gone too far and made a mistake, Orban replied with a yes. Now, as you know, they're landlocked. They really depend on that Russian oil due to their location, and there's not a lot of viable, economically sound options for them. And I don't have any documented, any documentation right now, but I have heard some rumors that some of the Baltic states have actually been caught back-ending and still secretly getting oil from Russia. Now, how they've gone about doing that, it seems like there's some leveraging of the shadow fleets to enable that into the Baltic states. Meanwhile, it appears that the government is looking at these Russian shadow fleets as a risk. So, but I haven't been able to verify that at a level that I could call that actual fact. It's really just the rumor at the moment in time. All right, so now we're going to move on to Pakistan. So this report came out yesterday for clarification. Earlier yesterday, there were reports of clashes at the line of control between India and Pakistan. And then from there, as well as Pakistan and Afghanistan peace talks in Istanbul reportedly collapsed after both sides failed to agree on key issues. Now, I do want to provide some peace talk updates, okay, which was that, but as well as since the time of that reporting, I do want to share that I haven't really heard anything. I've scoured, I've looked everywhere I can, and at this moment in time, I'm not seeing anything outside of that reporting where the peace talks have kind of, I don't know if they've completely stopped or if they just broke away for the day because they were getting agitated with one another. Not really quite sure what that progress yet is in Istanbul. And haven't seen any reports of fighting that has gone into anything critical between Afghanistan and Pakistan at the time of this video. However, there has been some additional reported clashes along India and Pakistan since the time of I was first able to report yesterday afternoon on the line of control. Now, a report came out about 2 hours ago this morning, and Lavrov has said that Russia has never had and does not have any intention to attack any NATO or EU states. So that is being reported from Russia. Now, it's kind of interesting because they say that. However, in addition, actually, they took it to the next level, and they said that they're actually prepared to sign documents that they won't do any attacks. Now, I'm not sure what to make of that. Take that for what you will. Now, we also have this picture, since we're on the subject of attacking. So, If you look here to the top, square blue, NATO air base. Red circle, drone sighting. And then a little explosion, drone crash. And as you see, Europe, Baltic states, Russia to the right. So I'm going to try to do this with the earliest to the latest. So September 9th, multiple Russian drones shot down after violating Polish airspace. And you can see there was multiples of that in and around Poland in comparison to their air bases. On September 13th, drone crashes in Latvia. Then on September 19th, 3 Russian jets violate Estonian airspace. And then you would have September 22nd, 23rd in Norway, and over Denmark specifically. And Norway had to close airports. Then you had the 24th and the 25th, and then in Danish airspace, and then 26th. And you see kind of some of that. I'm not really seeing on this graph. It's not complete. I don't see anything from Germany. I don't see anything for France. There's some stuff here that is missing, but at least it kind of gives you the Baltic states and Eastern Europe. So at night, a CHP plane exploded in the far east of Russia. Now I'm going to kind of expand it out. You know, it's funny. I just realized I didn't need to X out, go to the previous screen. There actually is that little love tab there to for the slideshow, which was what I was looking for earlier, but I guess I didn't have enough damn coffee. So you see this island here, right over here. And then you have North Korea, South Korea, etc. over here. Okay, this is where the blackouts, as well as, if you recall, the nuclear testing that was in this general area that occurred about 48. Well, actually, no, it was late last week where they were doing some nuclear ballistic missile testing. So, once I get some visual on that, I will update accordingly. As well as you see the jet and you see the helicopter. Well, the Russians shot down their own Ka-52 attack helicopter, shown in the left, with air-to-air missiles launched by their own fighter jet at the same time that Ukrainian long-range kamikaze drones flew over their positions. So, as you see here, you know, this is probably the first, second, third, fourth time where they've tried to hit something and they end up hitting the wrong thing. And I mean, you got to keep in mind, you know, that happens in any kind of war. But I think drones create a little bit more of an issue because of their sizes and their agility, and I would imagine a little bit of the response time as well, which is one of the reasons why it's a bit of a struggle for drone air defensive systems, and Europe, NATO, and United States, etc., trying to get some proper defense, because, you know, whether you make a mistake or not, you know, it doesn't make much sense to take $1 million missiles to thousands of dollar drones. It just economically doesn't make any sense unless you want to continue producing those missiles because of the economics of warfare. I still did it. Okay, some news this morning. First and foremost, Trump is now in Japan, and you know, he's landed, he's been visiting, and here they have signed a rare earth pact. So I'm going to briefly read this off in the event that you are listening versus watching. Japanese Prime Minister Takagachi and Donald Trump, I don't know if I said her name right, signed deal to reduce dependence on Chinese rare earth metals. Trump and Japan's new prime minister held their first summit in Tokyo. The first woman prime minister to hold the post pledged to usher in a new golden age of alliance with Washington. Trump in turn called her a true leader for her determination to strengthen Japan's defense. Following the talks, the two sides signed a framework agreement to establish a joint supply chain and reserves of critical minerals and rare earth elements. The main goal of the deal is to reduce both countries' dependence on imports from China, which currently dominates the industry. Japan has already cut the share of rare earth imports from China to 60%, down from 90% a decade ago. The agreement came shortly after Beijing tightened export controls on these metals. And then here's a picture of Trump getting ready to meet. Basically, it's just, updating that he had landed in Japan, and as well as wanting to talk about trade pacts. All right. Where's my video here? Oh. Try to do this again. This is Trump in Malaysia. Shortly after he landed. It's getting jiggy with it. So it's kind of fun. And then we're going to shift briefly back to Ukraine. So I found this just before I went into recording this video, and apparently this is around Moscow, but I'm not really sure, and this is the only video I could find, even though it's a terrible video. As you see, it's reported as the flight of a Ukrainian Flamingo rocket during an attack on Moscow on the night of October 26, 27. We're going to do a little video again. Let me try to zoom this for you. And it's not going to do it right now. Okay, so this is pretty cool. So you kind of see these renderings here. Let me zoom it all the way up. So you can kind of see right here what this thing looks like. And, it's obviously some renderings. So what is this weird thing? Well, they're calling it the American Batman. It's San Diego Defense Company says its new AI fighter jet could outsmart a Chinese first strike. And it's set to be combat ready by 2029. The X-Bat can take off vertically, fly thousands of miles, and fight without a GPS or constant communications. It's built to survive when the first shots are fired. And that's really the only information I have on it. I don't really have any information either on, what defensive company it is or anything technical like that. But it's pretty cool. Now we'll just see what it looks like in the air. Now moving on to Venezuela and the South Caribbean Sea. So the last couple of days, there's been some B-1s, etc., doing some simulated routes, if you will, from the mainland U.S. towards Venezuela. And really, they're doing some exercises, and that's been kind of happening the last several days. Not sure exactly what the ultimate goal with that is, if it's just trying to intimidate Venezuela, or if they're just rerunning the same thing in preparation or for future warfare with Venezuela. But nonetheless, in this case, yesterday, There was more that had left the U.S. mainland, and they flew towards Venezuela. And this time, which was one of the first times that I'm aware of, that as they got closer to Venezuela, they actually turned off their transponders. So that is significant. If you recall, whenever there was some of the drone incursions into European states or countries, you could still see NATO aircraft, Polish aircraft, etc., Swedish aircraft. When they got into the air, you could still see it on Flight Radar 24 and track it. And it wasn't until that really the last time we had those incursions coming from Ukraine into Polish territory, etc., that the transponders had shut off. Here's some more Venezuela. Minus the music. So in the very background, it's the Earth, then you have the Moon, then you have the International Space Station. Really kind of gives that pretty neat size perspective. We'll do it one more time. Pretty neat little video there.